Hey guys, welcome back to All Booked Up. My name is Adrian. Nice to have you here on the channel. Today we are going to be having a spoiler-free look at Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This came out in 2020, and as the name may suggest, it is definitely a modern take on a classic Gothic novel setup. So it is definitely speculative fiction. It's got definitely some horror elements and some fantasy elements as well. And it was not a book that I particularly thought I would love going into it. Now, I mainly got to this because of Reddit bingo. I've got a video on the channel describing some of the books I'm intending to read for my bingo this year. This was my main front runner for the Gothic square. So I did get to that at the beginning of this month, May, and actually I will say I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, which is exactly what bingo is for making you read things that you might not otherwise read, but actually you might end up enjoying. So this starts off with our main character, Noemi, receiving a frantic letter from her cousin. Her cousin is begging Noemi and her family to save her from a mysterious doom that is happening in a distant house in the countryside of Mexico. Noemi is from Mexico City, so she is definitely a city girl. She's in her early 20s, and she's not sure what she'll find when she gets to her cousin's house. Her husband is an Englishman, mostly a stranger to Noemi. She's only met him a couple of times, and she knows very little about the region or his family. As we do get to this house in the countryside, this is where the Gothic vibes really start, and this is a few chapters in. I will say that is as much spoiler stuff as you're going to get here in this review, but I just want to talk about how I felt about this book, where I thought it was really strong, and some of the issues I had with it. So firstly, I feel like Noemi is a very interesting character. I feel like I understood her quite well from the off, which is good going. I think Silvia Moreno-Garcia does a really good job setting her up early in the first chapter or two, and I think that strong character work does follow through for most of the book, which is a really good positive. Now, the really, really big positive I'm going to have for this book is the atmosphere. I think the creepy Gothic atmosphere, you know, haunted house thing was captured extremely well. I think by halfway through this book, I had a really uneasy feeling around this house. I think that it is done incredibly, incredibly well. And it definitely does hark back to Dracula, Frankenstein, those kind of books. For me, I absolutely adore Dracula. I loved it as a teenager and I still do. And it definitely had that feeling of the house that you get in Dracula. It's in Dracula's house that we get introduced to early on. It had that kind of dark, mysterious, quiet eeriness that is just done so well, and I think that's one of the really strong selling points here. If you want that suspense, uneasy Gothic feeling, this book delivers that supremely well. As is often the case in books that really heavily rely on suspense, I did feel that the middle dragged slightly. And I know why that is. I know that it's because we want to spend longer and longer building this suspense, building this tension. But for me, it dragged just a little bit. And that was one of the weaknesses here. I got a little bit bored in the middle. The middle only lasted maybe 1 or 2 chapters longer than I wanted it to. So it wasn't a huge problem, but it did struggle. It didn't nail its pacing for me in that sense. I did love the hints that were dropped throughout about this family and house's background, and I think that the execution of sort of the reveal and how the plot ends was done pretty well. It wasn't a home run for me, but I think it was done well enough, and actually I felt like I got a satisfying resolution to this story, which I'm always doubtful of a little bit in sort of suspense and tension-based books. So yeah, in this book, the house very much feels like one of the main characters, which again has that very classic Gothic vibe. It was something that I felt was done very well, but I do think some of the secondary and sort of tertiary characters are also well realised. I think although we don't always understand their motivations, that's part of the mystery of it, I do think some of them don't necessarily make complete sense as you're going through. They do things that you find odd for their character. Now, some of that is resolved later on, but it wasn't something I loved as we went through. It felt a little bit inconsistent in its characterization of some of the secondary and tertiary characters. I did struggle a little bit with how Noemi was so often set up as a damsel in distress, but I do like the twist on that we weren't really waiting for a hero to come and save the day, that she knew that it was on her. And actually that is something I did enjoy, that we took that trope and we subverted it a little bit, and I thought that was great. Overall, this book was an enjoyable read for me. It's definitely not an all-time favourite, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would for this kind of book, and it was a solid 3.5 stars for me. I would definitely recommend it for you if you love the Gothic horror genre. It is definitely horror light, Gothic heavy, and it definitely does bring a modern spin to that genre. As long as you're happy with someone taking a slightly more modern tone and slightly more modern approach to the Gothic horror genre, I think you will enjoy this. If you want it to be full-on horror, you're not going to get that. It's definitely more suspense and dread than it is full-out horror. So overall, a good book, one I enjoyed, especially considering how I thought it wasn't really going to be for me, and this is a good 3.5 star read that if any of that description appeals to you, absolutely give it a go. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you all again soon.